I went into that Christmas dinner believing, honestly believing, that this year would be different. I told myself I was older now, steadier, not that kid still waiting for approval. I walked in with a wrapped gift under my arm and a practiced smile on my face, repeating in my head that I belonged there just as much as anyone else. The house smelled like roasted food and pine, and laughter bounced off the walls in that familiar way that usually makes people feel warm. We all sat around the table after dinner, plates pushed aside, lights dimmed just enough to feel cozy. My mom stood up with a stack of presents, suddenly animated, her voice bright. She started calling out names, handing boxes across the table, making little comments about how each gift was chosen. Everyone smiled, laughed, hugged. I watched carefully, waiting for my name to come up, telling myself not to overthink it. One by one, the pile got smaller, shifted in my chair, still smiling, nodding along, pretending I wasn't counting. When the last gift was handed out, the room went quiet in a way that didn't feel planned. A few people glanced at me, then back at my mom. She avoided my eyes, busy straightening the empty wrapping paper. That's when it landed. There was nothing for me. No envelope, no afterthought, not even a joke gift. Just space where my name should have been. I laughed first, because I didn't know what else to do. I made some comment about being forgotten, said it lightly, like it didn't matter. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, higher than usual. My chest felt tight, like I was holding my breath without realizing it. No one rushed to correct it. No one jumped in to say there must be a mistake. The moment stretched, awkward and exposed, until conversations slowly restarted without me. I sat there the rest of the night feeling like I'd shrunk. I smiled when people spoke to me, nodded at jokes, cleaned up plates, played the role I always played. Inside, though, everything felt raw. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering how something so small could hurt so much. It wasn't about the gift. It was about being seen, or not being seen, in front of everyone. When it was time to leave, I hugged people quickly and said I was tired. No one stopped me. I walked to my car alone, the cold air hitting my face harder than usual. The drive home felt longer than it ever had. Every red light gave my thoughts more room to spiral. I remembered all the times I'd tried to be helpful, supportive, easy to deal with. Every time I'd shown up when asked. Every time I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. That night, sitting in my dark apartment, I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. I tried to convince myself I was being dramatic. Still, the image of my mom handing out gifts and skipping right over me replayed again and again. What I didn't know yet was that it wasn't accidental. It wasn't a mistake or forgetfulness. It was deliberate, and it was meant to send a message. Also didn't know that 2 weeks later, everything would flip. The same people who looked away that night would be calling, texting, and showing up at my door with completely different energy. At that moment, though, all I felt was small, embarrassed, and strangely certain that this wasn't going to stay buried as just another uncomfortable holiday memory. That dinner didn't end when I left the house. It followed me home, and it quietly set something in motion that I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. I grew up believing that family loyalty was automatic, something you didn't have to earn or negotiate. In my mind, a mother's support was supposed to be steady, especially when no one else understood you. I was the middle child, which meant I learned early how to stay out of the way. I wasn't the loud one or the dramatic one. I did my homework, followed rules, and tried to make things easier for everyone around me. Praise usually landed on someone else, and I told myself that was fine. Being dependable felt like its own reward. As I got older, that role followed me. I became the one who showed up early, stayed late, and fixed problems quietly. I built a stable adult life piece by piece. I worked consistently, paid my bills on time, avoided unnecessary conflict, and kept my head down. When family needed help, I helped. When they needed calm, I provided it. I thought that was what being a good son meant. I didn't ask for much in return, because I assumed the connection itself was enough. My mom, though, had a different way of seeing generosity. To her, it was visible and conditional. She liked appreciation, recognition, and obedience wrapped together. When she gave, she expected alignment. When someone disagreed or slowed her down, her warmth cooled quickly. Growing up, I didn't have language for that. I just felt it as distance. Compliments came when I followed the script. Silence arrived when I didn't. A few months before Christmas, she asked me to loan her money for an idea she was excited about. It sounded risky, rushed, and poorly planned. For the first time, I didn't say yes automatically. I asked questions. I took time. Then I said no. I explained calmly that I couldn't support it. Choosing that boundary felt uncomfortable, but also necessary. I didn't realize how much that single word would change things. After that, her calls became shorter. Her tone shifted from warm to formal. Invitations felt obligatory instead of welcoming. Holidays, which were already complicated, felt colder. I sensed disappointment, but it wasn't discussed openly. Instead, it hung in the air, unspoken and heavy. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. I wanted Christmas dinner to be a reset, a return to normal. Sitting at that table later, watching what happened, everything clicked into place. I saw the invisible hierarchy clearly for the first time. Approval flowed in one direction. Affection followed compliance. Independence came with a cost. Moments from my childhood resurfaced, suddenly sharp and clear. The praise that skipped me. The silence that taught me not to ask. The way being easy made me useful, but not necessarily valued. I realized that my role had always been to stay steady, quiet, and available. My independence disrupted that balance. Saying no challenged a system that worked because I didn't. I wasn't being punished for one decision. I was being reminded where I stood. What hurt most wasn't anger, but clarity. Once I saw the pattern, I couldn't explain it away anymore. I understood why keeping peace had always felt like work, and why love felt earned instead of given. I started questioning how many choices I'd made just to avoid disappointment. The idea that my value depended on staying small unsettled me more than the rejection itself. I didn't confront anyone yet. I just listened differently. I noticed pauses, looks, and careful wording. Something in me was waking up, and even though I didn't know what would come next, I knew that the version of me who ignored these signs was already gone. Whether my family was ready for that change or not. The week before Christmas, I arrived at my mom's house carrying a small gift and an even smaller sense of hope. I told myself I was overthinking everything, that adults didn't keep score the way kids did. I reminded myself that life was busy, people forgot things, and not every slight was intentional. I repeated that quietly as I stepped inside, smiling, nodding, trying to feel normal. The house was full of noise and movement. My siblings joked loudly, overlapping each other's stories. Relatives crowded the kitchen, filling plates and arguing playfully about recipes. My mom floated between rooms with practiced ease, charming everyone, directing conversations, deciding where people sat. She had always been good at controlling the energy of a room without appearing to try. I watched her from a distance, telling myself tonight was just another holiday. As dinner wrapped up, I noticed the gifts. Wrapped boxes were stacked neatly near the tree, colorful paper catching the light. Each one had a tag, carefully written names facing outward. I scanned them casually at first, then more carefully. I didn't see my name, but I assumed nothing of it. Maybe mine was hidden. Maybe it was somewhere else. I told myself it would be funny later, something to tease her about gently. We cleared plates, settled into seats, and someone suggested opening presents. My heart started beating faster than it should have. I folded my hands in my lap and smiled, determined not to look nervous. My mom picked up the first gift and called out a name, her voice warm and animated. Laughter followed as paper tore and reactions spilled out. She moved easily from one person to the next, each gift thoughtful, specific, clearly planned. I waited, with each name that wasn't mine. I adjusted my posture, shifted my weight, kept my expression light. I nodded, clapped, made comments when expected. I told myself not to rush the moment, not to make it awkward. My mom didn't look at me once. Her eyes skimmed past my seat every time she reached for another box. The stack grew smaller. My smile started to feel stiff. When the last gift was opened, the room hesitated. Conversations slowed. Someone laughed uncertainly. A few people glanced at me, then back at my mom. She straightened wrapping paper, smoothed a ribbon, and said nothing. No explanation. No acknowledgement. The silence pressed in, thick and uncomfortable. I felt heat rush to my face while my hands went cold. I forced a laugh and made a comment about being invisible, trying to keep things light. My voice sounded unfamiliar, thinner than usual. No one laughed with me. No one stepped in to fill the gap. Years of swallowed disappointment compressed into that moment, making everything suddenly clear. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was deliberate. The realization landed quietly but heavily. I saw it in how no one defended me, how quickly the group shifted topics, how smoothly the moment was buried. The silence said more than words ever could. Sitting there, exposed and oddly calm, I understood that something had changed, and there was no going back to pretending it hadn't. After that night, I didn't say much. I went home, slept badly, and woke up to my phone lighting up with notifications. The family group chat was suddenly busy again. Photos of gifts appeared, captions thanking my mom, jokes about who got what. I scrolled slowly, noticing how natural it felt for everyone to celebrate without mentioning me. My name never came up. It was like I hadn't been there at all. I didn't comment or react. I just watched the conversation move forward without me. Later that day, a cousin messaged me privately. She said she was sorry and admitted she assumed I'd gotten something later, maybe quietly. Her message felt awkward, unsure, like she didn't want to dig too deep. I told her it was fine and left it at that. I didn't correct her assumption. I didn't explain. I didn't have the energy to defend something that shouldn't have needed defending. My mom texted me that evening. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a question. She asked if I wanted leftovers. The casual tone landed harder than I expected. It was like the dinner never happened. Like nothing unusual had occurred. That dismissal hurt more than the moment itself. It confirmed that the silence was intentional, not uncomfortable for her at all. Over the next few days, I started noticing old patterns resurfacing in my mind. Times when I was quietly excluded so things stayed smooth. Moments when discomfort was avoided by pretending I wasn't affected. I realized how often I'd absorbed awkwardness so others didn't have to. This time, though, something in me resisted stepping back into that role. I stopped responding immediately to messages. Not to punish anyone, but to give myself space. I didn't initiate conversations or jump in to reassure people. That distance didn't go unnoticed. Soon, I heard through indirect comments that I was being sensitive and pulling away. The language sounded familiar. It was how my mom explained things when she didn't want to address them directly. The narrative shifted quietly. Instead of asking how I felt, relatives started treating me like I'd done something wrong. I sensed it in the tone of messages, the way questions were framed. I was described as ungrateful, distant, difficult to read. No one asked me what happened. They trusted the version that was already circulating. It felt strange being talked about instead of talked to. I was still part of the family, technically, but something had changed. I was on the outside of an inside story. Group plans moved forward without checking my availability. Conversations felt careful, like people were choosing words around me. The place that once felt familiar now felt staged, like I was visiting instead of belonging. Started to feel isolated in a way I hadn't before. Not loudly rejected, but quietly repositioned. The more I pulled back, the more the story about me solidified without my input. I could feel something being set up, even if I didn't yet know what it was. The exclusion wasn't resolving itself. It was expanding. What unsettled me most was how easily everyone adjusted. No one challenged the narrative. No one paused to ask why I might be hurt. It showed me how powerful a single voice could be when it shaped the first explanation. I realized then that the dinner wasn't the end of the situation. It was the opening move, and whatever came next was already unfolding without my consent. Over the next 2 weeks, things didn't explode. They crept. The situation escalated quietly, almost politely, which somehow made it worse. I started getting messages that sounded supportive on the surface but felt strange underneath. People asked if I was doing okay in a way that implied I wasn't. A relative suggested budgeting tips out of nowhere. Another mentioned therapy casually, like it was a given. At first, I thought I was projecting. Then I realized these ideas weren't coming from nowhere. I learned that my mom had been telling people I was struggling financially and emotionally. According to her, I was overwhelmed, unstable, and pulling away because I couldn't cope. None of it was true. I was working consistently, paying my bills, keeping my routines. Still, the story spread easily, because it explained my distance without requiring anyone to question her behavior. Relatives stopped having real conversations with me. Instead of asking how I felt, they offered advice. Encouragement replaced curiosity. One sibling hinted that maybe I should apologize to smooth things over, even if I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. Peace, apparently, mattered more than accuracy. That comment stuck with me. I sat alone that night and opened my bank account, my calendar, my messages. I grounded myself in facts. I wasn't failing. I wasn't spiraling. My life was stable. But stability doesn't matter when perception shifts. I realized I was being reframed, not out of concern, but convenience. Then I heard about the investment through a cousin. I learned my mom was planning a family financial project that required everyone's trust and participation. Suddenly, her earlier request for money made sense. My refusal weeks ago hadn't just been a disappointment. It had slowed things down. It had introduced doubt. If I didn't trust the plan, what did that say to others? The dots connected painfully fast. Excluding me at Christmas wasn't just emotional punishment. It made it easier to discredit me later. If I was already framed as unstable or ungrateful, my concerns could be dismissed before they were even voiced. I felt a shift inside me, something sharp and cold. I stopped questioning my instincts and started documenting everything. Screenshots of messages. Dates of conversations. Notes about what people said and when. I didn't know exactly why I felt compelled to do it, only that something told me I would need clarity later. Silence was no longer neutral. It was being interpreted for me. The more I stayed quiet, the louder the assumptions became. My absence created space for a story that wasn't mine. I saw how quickly concern turned into control, how easily support masked pressure. The idea that my independence had to be explained away unsettled me deeply. Started preparing myself mentally for conflict. Not dramatic confrontation, but the kind that changes relationships permanently. I imagined conversations that might come, questions I might need to answer, truths I might have to defend. Even if no one else saw it coming, I did. What hurt most wasn't the lies themselves, but how effective they were. People believed them because they fit neatly. They explained why I didn't fall back into line. They protected a plan that needed compliance. I understood then that my silence wasn't being respected. It was being used. I didn't speak up yet. I watched. I listened. I let people reveal how much they were willing to assume without asking me directly. And with every passing day, I became more certain of one thing. This story wasn't going to end quietly, and if I didn't choose my moment carefully, it wouldn't end kindly either. As days passed, I started noticing how the stories about me didn't stay consistent. What one relative hinted at didn't match what another implied. To some, I was overwhelmed. To others, I was unreliable. In a few versions, I was bitter and holding grudges. None of them matched the life I was actually living. Instead of correcting people, I chose a different approach. I asked neutral questions and listened closely. I paid attention to wording, tone, and timing. The more I listened, the more the cracks showed. Details shifted depending on who was speaking. Explanations overlapped in ways that didn't make sense. I began taking screenshots, not emotionally, but methodically. Messages, missed calls, follow-ups. I labeled them by date. I wasn't planning anything yet. I just needed clarity. One afternoon, a relative forwarded me a voice note accidentally. It wasn't meant for me. In it, my mom repeated the same claims I'd already heard, but with added exaggerations. Hearing it directly felt different than hearing about it secondhand. There was confidence in her voice, certainty that no one would challenge the narrative. I saved it without responding. I started comparing timelines. When she said I'd withdrawn. When she said I'd refused support. When she claimed I was unstable. The dates didn't line up. Events overlapped in ways that proved the story had been adjusted after the fact. Each comparison chipped away at the version everyone else seemed comfortable believing. To ground myself further, I reached out to a friend who worked in law. I didn't want to take action. I just wanted to understand my rights and limits. He listened carefully and told me what mattered and what didn't. Knowing where I stood legally gave me quiet confidence. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't reckless. I was simply choosing restraint. I also spoke to a financial advisor, framing it hypothetically. I described the investment idea without naming anyone. He didn't hesitate. He pointed out risks, gaps, and unrealistic expectations. Hearing a professional confirm what my instincts already knew felt validating. It reminded me that my refusal hadn't been selfish or uninformed. It had been reasonable. Slowly, a clear picture formed. I wasn't the problem in this situation. I was the obstacle. My independence threatened a plan that relied on compliance. My silence allowed a story to grow, but my documentation preserved the truth underneath it. Each confirmation strengthened my resolve to stop absorbing blame that never belonged to me. I noticed how calm I felt while collecting evidence. It wasn't fueled by anger. It was clarity. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. I stopped doubting my memory. Facts replaced emotional fog. I understood that eventually, I would need to reveal what I knew, but not yet. Timing mattered more than urgency. Every piece of evidence felt like a weight lifting instead of piling on. I wasn't rushing to expose anyone. I was waiting. Watching. Letting patterns fully reveal themselves. The more complete the picture became, the steadier I felt. I knew that when the moment came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice or defend my character loudly. The truth would speak quietly, and it would be enough. Still, I kept everything to myself. I didn't hint at what I knew. I didn't change my tone. I stayed observant, patient, and deliberate. Because I understood something important then. When people believe they control the narrative, they get careless. And I had a feeling they were about to make it very easy for me to choose the right moment to finally step forward. The twist didn't come with a phone call or a confrontation. It arrived quietly in my inbox one afternoon while I was working. An unexpected email sat there, neutral subject line, nothing dramatic. I almost ignored it. When I opened it, my chest tightened. The family investment had collapsed before it ever launched. A partner had backed out after concerns were raised, and trust dissolved almost overnight. Buried in the explanation was something else. My name. Not directly accused, but referenced as a possible source of hesitation. Apparently, someone believed I had raised doubts behind the scenes. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Instead of panic, I felt relief. I knew exactly where I'd been, what I'd said, and to whom. I had proof I wasn't involved in any leak. More than that, I finally understood why I'd been positioned the way I was. Within hours, the tone around me shifted. Messages came in carefully worded, tentative. People who hadn't checked on me in weeks suddenly wanted clarification. For the first time, the story my mom had been telling didn't fit the outcome. If I was unstable and unreliable, why would anyone listen to me? Why would my opinion carry weight? The inconsistency was impossible to ignore. A sibling called that evening. Their voice sounded different, uncertain, stripped of the confidence I'd heard before. They didn't accuse me. They asked questions. Simple ones. What did I know? When had I heard about the plan? Had I spoken to anyone outside the family? I answered honestly and briefly. I didn't volunteer extra information. I let pauses exist. Silence did the work for me. As the news spread, the pressure shifted away from me and back toward the center of the plan. Relatives who once avoided me now wanted details. They asked when the investment was first discussed, who was involved, and why concerns hadn't been addressed earlier. I responded calmly, sticking to facts, never raising my voice or framing myself as wronged. The truth didn't need decoration. That's when the realization settled fully. The exclusion at Christmas hadn't just been punishment for saying no. It had been preemptive damage control. By isolating me early, my perspective could be dismissed later. By framing me as unstable, any hesitation I expressed could be ignored. But now that the plan failed, the narrative needed adjusting. People started noticing how quickly blame had landed on me without evidence. They began checking timelines on their own. Small contradictions surfaced naturally. I didn't point them out. I let others connect dots in real time. Watching that happen was surreal. For weeks, my silence had been used against me. Now, it worked in my favor. I noticed something else too. My mom's messages changed. They were shorter, more cautious. The certainty that once shaped every explanation was gone. She wasn't confronting me. She was recalibrating. The confidence she'd had when she thought the story was settled was replaced with something tighter, more defensive. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to rush in and fix anything. I didn't explain myself endlessly or soften the truth to protect feelings. I stayed neutral, steady, and present. I answered what I was asked and nothing more. Each conversation revealed how much people had assumed without checking. Each question they asked confirmed that doubt had finally entered the room. The most unsettling part was how quickly my role changed. I went from being the problem to being potentially useful. People wanted my perspective now. They wanted reassurance. They wanted clarity. I didn't offer it freely. I realized then that access was something I could choose. The plan had collapsed, but something else had cracked open with it. The version of the story everyone accepted no longer held together. And as they scrambled to fix it, I understood that the next phase wouldn't be about proving anything. It would be about deciding how much I was willing to give back to people who had already decided who I was without asking. I made a decision that surprised even me. I stopped chasing acceptance. I realized how much energy I'd spent trying to be understood by people who were comfortable misunderstanding me. So I wrote a calm message, nothing emotional, nothing defensive. I stated facts, set boundaries, and made it clear I would not discuss rumors or defend myself against assumptions. I read it twice before sending it, then once more after, letting the silence settle. I declined any future financial involvement immediately. No explanations, no justifications. I muted group chats that had become noisy with speculation and indirect commentary. When my mom called, I didn't answer right away. That choice felt strange at first, like I was breaking an unspoken rule. But I reminded myself that urgency had always benefited everyone except me. I returned the call later, calmly, without reopening old conversations. I shifted my focus intentionally. I poured my attention into work, into my health, into routines that grounded me. Morning walks, regular meals, early nights. Simple things I'd neglected while carrying emotional weight that wasn't mine. For the first time in a long while, my peace didn't depend on being understood or approved of. It depended on consistency and honesty with myself. I organized everything I'd collected into a single folder. Messages, screenshots, dates, notes. I didn't share it. I didn't threaten anyone with it. Knowing it existed was enough. This wasn't revenge or strategy. It was self-preservation. I understood that clarity was protection, even if it never left my hands, also knew stepping back would provoke reactions. Boundaries always do. Some people interpreted my distance as hostility. Others framed it as stubbornness. I didn't correct them. I let their reactions exist without managing them. Friends outside my family noticed the change almost immediately. They said I sounded lighter. They didn't question my choices or ask me to explain myself repeatedly. Their support came without conditions. That contrast was sobering. Being around people who didn't need me to shrink reminded me how distorted things had become at home. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd been editing until I stopped. The absence of tension felt unfamiliar at first, almost suspicious. I waited for guilt to rush in. It didn't. What arrived instead was calm. I braced myself for backlash quietly. I knew boundaries often feel like betrayal to people who benefit from access and control. Especially when those people are used to shaping narratives that protect them emotionally. I prepared for disappointment without rehearsing arguments. I stopped planning conversations in my head. I trusted that I would respond honestly if needed, and that was enough. The hardest part wasn't setting the boundaries. It was trusting myself to hold them without waiting for permission or validation. I had spent so long measuring my choices by how others reacted that choosing myself felt unfamiliar. Still, I stayed steady. Because deep down, I sensed that this distance was temporary, and that sooner rather than later, someone would force a conversation I could no longer avoid. The reaction came faster than I expected. Silence turned into calls, messages, and sudden concern almost overnight. People who hadn't checked on me in weeks now wanted to know why I was pulling away. My mom asked what was going on, framing it as confusion, like she couldn't understand why things felt distant. Relatives wanted explanations, reassurance, clarity. I didn't rush to provide comfort. I took my time and answered calmly. When I spoke, I stuck to facts. I didn't attack anyone or raise my voice. I described what I experienced, what was said, and what actually happened. When evidence came up, my mom deflected first. Then she minimized, calling it misunderstandings. Finally, she blamed stress and pressure. Watching that progression felt strange, like seeing a pattern from the outside for the first time. The room shifted when others noticed it too. People exchanged looks. Conversations slowed. Someone asked a follow-up question she couldn't answer cleanly. Another pointed out a timeline that didn't match her explanation. No one shouted. No one accused. The discomfort spoke for itself. Apologies followed, but not all at once. Some came quietly in private messages. Others came halfway, layered with excuses. I accepted them without enthusiasm or resentment. I didn't demand accountability beyond what people were ready to give. The investment failure forced a level of honesty no one had planned for. Questions that were easy to avoid before now needed answers. I didn't celebrate any of it. I observed. The karma wasn't dramatic punishment or public humiliation. It was exposure. The truth surfaced slowly, without effort from me. Relationships reset themselves around what people could no longer ignore. Some connections grew quieter. Others shifted into something more respectful. I stayed firm throughout it all. I refused to argue or rescue anyone emotionally. When people tried to pull me into managing feelings or smoothing tension, I declined gently. I wasn't cruel. I was consistent. That consistency did more than any confrontation ever could. Some people avoided me afterward. I could sense their discomfort, their inability to reconcile their role in what happened. Being around me reminded them of assumptions they made too easily. I didn't chase them. I let distance exist where it naturally formed. Others approached me differently, slower, more careful. They respected the boundaries I set without trying to negotiate them away. My mom's authority changed in subtle ways. Her version of events no longer carried automatic weight. When she spoke, people listened differently. They asked questions instead of nodding. They paused instead of rushing to defend her. I noticed it before she did. Then I saw her notice it too. The confidence she once had was replaced with something cautious, even uncertain. For the first time, consequences existed without my participation. I didn't enforce them. I didn't demand apologies or explanations. They unfolded naturally as people adjusted to a reality they hadn't planned for. I realized how often I'd absorbed discomfort to keep things running smoothly. Now, without me doing that work, the system corrected itself. What stayed with me most wasn't satisfaction. It was clarity. I saw who could sit with truth and who couldn't. I saw who valued peace over honesty and who understood that real peace requires both. I learned that karma doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly, changing how people see each other when no one is performing anymore. As things settled, I felt lighter, but also alert. I knew this wasn't the end of every conversation. Not everything was resolved. Some relationships would never return to what they were. Others might grow into something healthier with time. I stayed open but grounded. Because while the immediate fallout had passed, I sensed there was still one moment ahead that would force everything into the open, whether anyone was ready for it or not. Looking back now, I understand that the gift I didn't receive changed my life more than anything wrapped under that tree. It forced me to slow down and finally see patterns I had excused for years. Roles I accepted without question suddenly looked smaller than the person I had become. That moment of exclusion stripped away the stories I told myself to stay comfortable. I learned that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're a form of love, especially self-respect. And truth doesn't need volume to be real. It doesn't need dramatic speeches or emotional displays to stand firm. It only needs consistency. Family, I learned, doesn't always mean safety. Distance, when chosen intentionally, can be healthy and necessary. I didn't win anything tangible through this experience. No apology erased the past. No explanation repaired everything. What I kept was my dignity. I kept my clarity. I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. That alone was worth more than approval that came with conditions attached. If you're dealing with quiet exclusion, subtle manipulation, or constant self-doubt around certain people, pay attention to what happens when you step back. Notice how your body feels when you stop explaining yourself. Notice how peace slowly returns when you stop chasing validation. That peace is information. Sometimes karma isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply clarity arriving right on time. I'm not sharing this to shame anyone involved. Everyone has their own blind spots, their own fears, their own stories they protect. I'm sharing it because I know how easy it is to question your reality when everyone else seems comfortable with it. If something feels off, you're not imagining patterns. You're noticing them. Growth often means disappointing people who benefited from your compliance. That part is uncomfortable and lonely at first. You might feel like you're losing ground. But what you're actually losing is a role that no longer fits. In its place, you gain space to build relationships that respect your boundaries without negotiation or hidden expectations. Choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. It allows the right people to find you, the ones who don't need you to perform or stay silent to belong. Calm attracts clarity. And clarity attracts connections that don't require you to disappear to survive. Still think about that dinner sometimes. Not with anger, but with understanding. It was the moment everything cracked open. Without it, I might still be explaining myself, still waiting to be seen. Instead, I stepped back and let truth do what it always does when given time. It revealed everything. So I'll leave you with this question. If you were sitting at that table, feeling invisible, knowing what you know now, would you have stayed silent longer, or would you have trusted yourself sooner?